Hello, and welcome to the reading of Land and Sea. We will be starting at Chapter 7. Chapter 7. I awoke to the sound of people arguing, and I knew exactly who it was. My father and Pan. She could have been killed, my father was yelling. Well, it wasn't my fault. Felix, Pan was yelling back, but I interrupted. Stop fighting, I yelled. They both stopped and looked over and rushed to me. Emily, are you okay? They both said in unison. I'm her father. Well, I'm her closest friend. What is wrong with you two? I yelled, getting up and running as far and as fast as I could. But my knees eventually gave up. Pan teleported to me, and I could hear my father cutting through the forest. But what I didn't know is that I had accidentally scratched myself multiple times on dreamshade bushes. I collapsed to the ground, the poison working its way to my heart. Pan hurried to my side, knowing what was going on. Jones! Pan yelled, face filled with worry. What is it? My father said as he approached me. He looked down at me and saw what was wrong. Oh no. My father picked me up and began to walk up the mountain I had fallen nearby. Pan followed close behind, anxiously looking at me. They had small conversations, but were virtually quiet. It was very scary, knowing that my life was on the verge of ending. They knew it, I knew it, and we were all sad that today might be the last day I would have with them. What was my mother going to say? When we arrived near the peak of the mountain, Pan moved a bush of dreamshade and revealed a waterfall. My father gently set me down, brought out a canteen, and filled it with the water. Are you sure you want to do this? Pan asked my father. You know the consequences. Aye, and I know that I can't just let my daughter die before my eyes, my father said, with determination on his face. Well then, drink up, Emily. It may be a little bit bitter, but it will heal you, Pan told me, and my father handed down the canteen. I gulped down its contents and immediately felt the water's healing powers. As Pan had said, it was a tad bit bitter, but it was better than death. I leaned up off the ground and hugged my father, and then I went over to Pan and gave him a hug as well. Thank you, I said softly. Don't mention it, Pan said, grabbing me and my father and teleporting us to the shore. I'll see you tomorrow, that is, if you want to finish that tour of the island. I glanced over at my father, and he had nodded his head yes. I turned back to Pan. I would love to see you again tomorrow, Pan. Oh, and one more thing. He came up to me and whispered in my ear, You can call me Peter, but only when we're alone, okay? Okay, I whispered back, and my father and I went back to the ship. And so, we did this for 3 years, me visiting Pan and the Lost Boys, Pan taking me home at dawn. As time went on, Pan began to tell me secrets about himself, some that not even Felix knew. One day, Felix had kissed me and Pan had gotten, angry. Now I was confused, trying to understand what was going on. My life went on, and so did everyone else's. But then, it was time for my family to leave Neverland. Chapter 8. My father wanted to find a new land for me and my mother to live, and knew that it would be hard because I had drank the water from the falls at the top of the mountain. Apparently, I would not be able to leave the island, or else I would die. But my father had a plan. He took half of the canteens that we had, filled them to the brim with the waterfall's water, and thought that if I drank half a canteen a day, I would be able to survive, for this would only be a short trip to and from a place he called the Enchanted Forest. So we left Neverland at noon. I had already said goodbye to the Lost Boys, but no one had told Peter about our departure. He came to the shore, wanting to bring me to a dance, or at least a powwow of sorts, but his face was discouraged when he saw me waiting for him with tears in my eyes. What's wrong? You look as if you'll never see me again, Pan said, trying to understand the situation at hand, not knowing that he was so close to what was actually going on. But we're leaving, I managed to say before falling into a pit of sadness. Shh, don't cry, love. I'll see you again. Your father is probably just going to loot some homes and then return back to Neverland. You really think so? I know so. All you have to do is believe that you will come back, Pan said, wiping a tear from his eye, not able to stand the fact that I was crying so much. I will look all over the world for you if you don't. Emily, it's time to go, my mother yelled from the ship. Goodbye, Peter Pan. Goodbye, Emily Jones. Chapter 9. When we reached the shores of the enchanted forest, I began to feel dizzy. So while my father and his crew loaded things onto the Jolly Roger, I lay below deck with my mother, and every 10 minutes or so she would give me some of the magic water. But about halfway through the day, my mother went upstairs, where we could hear a skirmish from above. All of a sudden, I heard my mother scream, and then everything was still. I could hear someone approaching the entrance of the sleeping quarters, where I was. "Well, look at what we have here. A dada!" the man said in a Scottish accent. All I could do was lay there and look at this strange man, and I noticed that his skin looked like leather or scales. "Emily, I'm coming!" I could hear someone shouting. It sounded like Pan, but that couldn't be possible. Pan was back on Neverland. As I heard someone come crashing through the doorway, I fainted. When I woke back up, I was on the shores of Neverland, with Pan and my father sitting near a campfire. "Papa, what's the matter?" I asked. "Emily, do you remember the man who came below deck?" "Yes." "Well, he killed your mother. At one time she had been his wife, but your mother left him for me, and that was after they had had a son. Emily, you have a half-brother. What might his name be?" "Balefire. And I want you to remember that name, because I think that you will be meeting him sometime," my father told me, and he stood up. "Emily, I have a crocodile at the skin. You are to stay away from Pan until I return. Do you understand?" I glanced over at Pan and nodded my head. I could immediately see the hurt in his eyes, and I wanted to tell him that it would be okay, that we would see each other again. But I couldn't, because my father was standing right there. Instead, I walked up to Pan and gave him a hug. But during that hug, I dropped something into his hand. I looked away from Pan and began to walk away. Pan had trained me how to survive in Neverland, and those skills would come in handy now. "You are no longer Emily Jones. You, my dear, are Emily Hook," my father yelled. And those were the last words I ever heard from him. Chapter 10. For 3 years I lived alone in the jungles of Neverland. I wanted to go to Peter's camp, but I knew that if my father was to come back, he would be really angry with me. But after 3 years of being with myself, I was going to live with Peter and the Lost Boys. I walked over to the edge of their camp, wanting to make a grand entrance. The boys were yelling and dancing, and it would be as good a night as any to come back. So I shot an arrow through the trees, right towards Peter. I began to swing around my dagger and make noises as if I was alerting a group. Then I walked into the camp. "Hello, boys!" I yelled cheerily into the air. They had all been preparing to go to battle, until they saw me. The first to speak was Felix. "Let's just say—" "Oh, whoops. Never mind. That's not it." "Well, Pan, she came back. Wonder what her father is going to do to you," he said, trying to break the silence that had fallen. "Well, I can assure you, mate, that my father is not coming back anytime soon. Oh, and I see that you have some new recruits, eh, Peter?" I said, trying to begin a conversation. Pan was stuck in a spellbound stupor. "Emily, why have you come here?" Pan finally managed to get out. "Well, as you probably noticed, it has taken my father longer than expected to return. And plus, it was getting kind of lonely in the tree fort," I said with a wave of confidence washing over me. "Oh, and also, I came up to take the offer that you gave me when I was a little girl." "What offer?" Pan said, trying to remember. Eventually, he figured it out. He grinned with excitement. "You mean you finally want to be a lost girl?" I said, trying to sound a little more bored than I really was. "Well, first things first. Can you hear the music?" Pan asked, grabbing some bamboo rods that had been woven together. They began to play a beautiful but sad song, and time seemed to stand still. Yes, I can. It's beautiful," I said, feeling the urge to join the boys around the fire and dance. Someone gave me 2 thick bamboo poles, and I began to feel the beat of the music. That was the first step. "Tomorrow we start training," Pan yelled over the sound of the boys and I. He grabbed me around the waist, and we began to dance. It was a wonderful feeling, gliding over the jungle floor in the arms of Peter, the sounds of the Lost Boys dancing and singing all around us. We danced all night, the sound of the music taking us away, until about 1 in the morning. The boys began to slowly stop dancing, and the sounds of their voices began to grow into a whisper. When everything had stopped, Peter spoke to me. "Emily, follow me," he whispered into my ear. He gently took my hand and we walked towards the outskirts of the camp. "What is it, Peter?" I asked. "I need you to close your eyes for a minute," Peter told me. So I closed my eyes and waited for him to tell me when to open them. All right, Emily, you can open your eyes. I looked around the clearing that Peter had brought me to. It was the same cliff that he had taken me to when I was younger, except it was different. There was a small table with candelabra in the middle, and fireflies were dancing around in the night sky. There was a beautiful rose sitting on the table, and a box wrapped in shiny gold paper. On the box the words, "To Emily, from Peter. Happy birthday." "Oh, Peter, it's beautiful," I cried softly into the night sky. He pulled out one of the chairs at the table and offered it to me to sit on. I walked over and sat down, my curiosity going overboard at the thought of sitting at this beautiful table. "I wanted to do something special, since today is your birthday. I hope you like chocolate." He snapped his fingers, and 2 plates of chocolate cake smothered in chocolate buttercream frosting appeared. I grabbed the fork next to me and tried a bite. "Peter, where did you find this cake? It's amazing," I said, my voice slightly muffled by the cake in my mouth. Let's just say that I wanted to make this birthday special. It was really nothing hard, if you know what I mean. I did know what he meant. He meant that this had been a piece of someone else's cake, and he had transported it here, along with all the other things that were here, except for the present. Once we finished the cake, my curiosity overtook me. "Peter, can I finally open the present? I have practically been eyeing it down this whole time." And indeed I had been. I had hardly looked away from it, studying everything about it. "All right, I guess I have put you through enough suspense. You can open it." Although he was trying to sound bored, I could see that he was just excited as me to see the reaction I gave of his gift. I gently unwrapped the present, making Peter grow even more worried about my response. Finally, I couldn't take it any longer. I ripped open the present, tossing the shred of paper over at Peter. Finally, I got to the box, and I gently opened the lid. "Oh, Peter, you didn't have to," I cried, gently taking out the gift he had given me. It was a dagger, but not just any dagger. It was gracefully curved, and the edges so sharp that it seemed like just holding the hilt I could cut my finger. The dagger itself was a shiny silver, as if it had never been used. The hilt was made out of gold linen, making it soft but sturdy to the touch. There were diamonds circling around the area where the hilt met the blade. I wanted you to have something that you could remember me by, for when my time comes, as you said. That dagger has magical properties, so that you could turn the tip into ice or fire, either to burn or freeze your foes. And the hilt has healing abilities, and it will be able to keep you alive and young. Even when you leave Neverland." Pan was beginning to grow more excited by the second. "Peter, I can't accept this. It was made for someone of royalty, not a pirate's stature." "Well, you are the Queen of Neverland, then. Does that make it fit you better?" "It does, actually. Thank you, Peter. I guess I owe you a gift to you now, huh?" "Actually, you already did, on the day your father left." My memory swirled back to that day, and I do remember that I had given him a gift of remembrance. "Do you still have it?" He pulled it out, the sword I had stolen from Rumpelstiltskin, the man who killed my mother. "I was always wondering where you could have gotten this from. Could you please tell me?" "I stole it from Rumpelstiltskin before I blacked out," I said proudly. Peter raised an eyebrow, but quickly lowered it. He yawned loudly. "Emily, my dear, I believe it is time for us to get some rest. I will show you to your tent, unless, of course, you would like to share a tent with me." "I would rather share a tent with you than be alone, if that is what you are heading towards." "Excellent. I will have a cot added to my tent as we are walking back." He snapped his fingers, proving to me that he had gotten the job done. We walked silently to the tent, the biggest one in camp. "Welcome to your new home." It was nothing like what I expected. I was thinking that it would be a green tent with 2 poles in the middle, with nothing but our cots and an oil lamp. Instead, there were 2 luxurious beds on the nightstand, with nightstands beside them, one with my name over it, the others with Peter's. On my side of the room there was a desk, bookshelf, painting easel, and a closet. It was slightly the same on the other, but without the painting easel. Instead, there was a giant map of Neverland, with labels such as Lost Camp, Tree Fort, and the Cliff. The words Joan's Ship were scratched out, as if Peter had wanted to make sure that everything on his island was where it belonged. "I was not expecting so grand of a room to be inside of such a small tent," I said in amazement. "It is bigger on the inside," Peter told me. "Good night." "Good night." The end of Chapter 10. I'll see you in the next video.